Hey everyone, and welcome. When we talk about ESG investing, the E for environment gets a ton of airtime, right? Same for G, governance. But what about that S stuck in the middle, the social factor? Honestly, it's often the most complex, the most, human part of the whole equation. So today, we're going to pull back that curtain and really figure out what it means for a company and for you as an investor. All right, let's jump right in.
Okay, let me kick things off with a question for you. If I were to ask you, what is a company's most valuable asset? What pops into your head? Maybe their massive factories, all their tech patents, or maybe just the cold, hard cash they've got in the bank? And look, those are all decent answers, but they don't really get to the heart of the matter.
Because the real answer, the thing that truly drives value over the long haul, it almost never shows up as a line item on a balance sheet. It's the people. It's their skills, their safety, their morale. It's the relationships a company builds with its customers and its communities. This is the core of the social factor in ESG, and it's exactly what we're digging into today.
So, you might be wondering, why is this suddenly such a big deal? Well, it's because the whole game has changed. Investors are now waking up to the fact that how a company treats its people and manages its social impact is directly tied to its financial health. The pressure is coming from everywhere: clients, regulators, and there's this growing recognition that getting this stuff right actually has real financial benefits. It's not just a nice-to-have anymore, it's absolutely core to smart investment analysis.
All right, so what are we talking about here exactly? Let's get a nice, clear definition on the table. Social factors are, quite simply, anything that affects the lives of humans. And this umbrella is huge. It covers everything from a company's own employees, what we call human capital, all the way to its customers, the local communities it operates in, and even things like animal welfare. It's a massive category, so let's try to break it down.
A really good way to get our arms around this whole S factor is to think of a company's social performance as two separate worlds. First, you've got its internal world. That's all about how it treats the people and manages relationships inside the company walls. And then you've got its external world, which is how its products and its operations impact the rest of society.
And this table here gives us a perfect map of those two worlds. See, on the left, you've got all the internal stuff, like human capital and working conditions. And on the right, the external factors, like product safety and community impact. For this explainer, we are going to focus like a laser on that left column, on a company's inner world. So, where do we start? We start with human capital. Now, this is partly about how a company invests in its workforce to make sure they're skilled and productive. But even more important, more fundamental, it's about whether that company provides a safe and respectful place for people to actually work. A really strong company doesn't just hire people, it invests in them. It makes sure they have the right training and the right tools for the job. It works hard to create a healthy environment. And this is critical. It has an absolute zero-tolerance policy for things like harassment and discrimination. Believe me, this isn't just about dodging lawsuits. It's about building a culture that the best people actually want to be a part of. But what happens when these things go wrong? Well, this quote right here gets to the absolute heart of the risk. For these massive global companies, the biggest dangers aren't always sitting in their shiny corporate headquarters. No, they're hidden, sometimes thousands of miles away, buried deep inside these incredibly complex supply chains where nobody's really watching. This number, it represents one of the most heartbreaking examples of what can happen. Back in 2013, the Rana Plaza garment factory in Bangladesh collapsed. It killed 1,134 workers. It was a complete and utter failure of health and safety, and it sent absolute shockwaves through the entire global fashion industry and the investment world too. And this is where we see those hidden risks come to life. The collapse wasn't some random accident. It was the predictable result of a whole chain of failures. People ignored obvious warnings about structural cracks in the building. There was this intense, relentless pressure from global brands to hit deadlines. And at the end of the day, there was just a total lack of accountability for worker safety. It's a powerful, tragic lesson in how ignoring these internal social factors can lead to devastating human and financial costs. Which leads us directly into our next big topic, the fundamental rights that every single worker should be guaranteed. You can think of these principles as the bedrock of a company's social license to operate. And the baseline, the global standard for all of this, is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It was established by the UN way back in 1948, more than 70 years ago. And the expectation today is pretty simple. Businesses, no matter where they are in the world, have to uphold these basic principles. And to make it really practical for businesses, the UN came up with this three-pillar framework. It's actually pretty straightforward. Pillar 1,
governments have to protect human rights. Pillar 2, companies have a responsibility to respect those rights. And Pillar 3, if things do go wrong, victims have to have a way to get justice. This is basically the modern playbook for how a responsible company should act.
Now, within that playbook, investors are especially focused on screening out the absolute worst of the worst violations, like the two you see here: child labor, work that literally robs children of their future, and forced labor, which is any work that's done under threat, where someone isn't there voluntarily. Finding these practices in a supply chain and stamping them out, that's a total non-negotiable.
Okay, so we've talked about human capital, we've talked about safety, we've talked about rights, but how does this all circle back to your investment portfolio? This is the million-dollar question, right? Why should an asset manager sitting in New York or London care about working conditions in a factory halfway around the globe?
The answer is simple. It's about risk. Plain and simple. Companies with terrible social track records are just walking financial time bombs. A factory shutdown from a safety issue, that's operational risk. A modern slavery scandal hits the news, that's massive reputational damage. Then you have the legal risks, fines, lawsuits, you name it. And in today's world, the best and brightest people just don't want to work for a company with a bad reputation. These are all very real, very material financial risks.
So the real takeaway here is that we need to flip the whole perspective. Getting these social factors right isn't an expense, it's an investment. It's an investment in a more stable supply chain, a stronger brand, a more motivated workforce, and ultimately a more resilient company. The truth is, companies that really nail the S are often just better managed businesses, period. They're built to last.
And that really leaves us with one final thought. Investing isn't passive. Every dollar you put to work is a vote for a certain way of doing business. By paying attention to the S in ESG, you aren't just managing risk in your portfolio. You are actively choosing to support companies that value human beings. So the question I'll leave you with is this. When you invest, what kind of company are you helping to build?